Good evening. I'm Simone Sanders Townsend, and we begin this hour with the continued open defiance by President Trump and his administration of what? The rule of law and the courts, including the United States Supreme Court. At this very moment, an emergency hearing is ongoing over the efforts by the Department of Justice to resume deporting Venezuelan migrants. Now, Judge James Boasberg is hearing from the ACLU after the group provided evidence that the Department of Justice was seeking to deport the migrants without the opportunity to contest it, and that is in direct defiance of the Supreme Court's recent ruling. We'll have more on that shortly. In another case of deportations gone wrong, it's been 34 days since the administration mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a notorious Salvadorian prison, and 8 days since the nation's highest court required this administration to, quote, facilitate his release. So far, Donald Trump, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and many others in the administration have not only ignored the Supreme Court, they have openly said that in no way is Abrego Garcia coming back into this country. Some in the administration are now even claiming that his deportation to El Salvador wasn't actually a mistake at all, even though as recently as last week, the Solicitor General of the United States, John Sauer, who works for Donald Trump, acknowledged just that in his filing to the Supreme Court. And instead of trying to make their case against Abrego Garcia in a court of law, providing the evidence to back up their many, many egregious claims against him, especially as he has not been charged or convicted of any crimes in the United States, El Salvador, even Venezuela, I'm talking about the United States government, the Department of Justice, the President of the United States, the entirety of the Trump administration. They have just decided to make their case in the court of public opinion, and they've enlisted the help of another world leader. Salvadorian President and Trump ally Bukele was the first to post pictures last night of Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen's meeting with Abrego Garcia in El Salvador. Not at the prison, which Van Hollen was denied access to, but in a quite staged cafe environment where Abrego Garcia is seen dressed in normal clothes versus the prison's all-white jumpsuit he has had to wear for over a month. Bukele appearing to mock the situation, writing, Abrego Garcia miraculously risen from the death camps and torture, now sipping margaritas with Senator Van Hollen in the tropical paradise of El Salvador. Well, as to the staging, lest we forget, folks, that Bukele was very quick to allow DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to that same prison last month to film her propaganda video in front of those detained there. Look at that. Upon returning to the United States from El Salvador, Senator Van Hollen laid out why this case is so important, not just to Kilmar Abrego Garcia and his family, but to all Americans.
It's also important that people understand this case is not just about one man. It's about protecting the constitutional rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America. Yes. If you deny the constitutional rights of one man, you threaten the constitutional rights and due process for everyone else in America. So I say to the President and the Trump administration, if you want to make claims about Mr. Abrego Garcia and MS-13, you should present them in the court, not over social media. That's right. That's right. Not at press conferences where you just rattle stuff off.
And in a further sign of this administration's thumbing its nose at the Supreme Court, they posted this altered photo today of the New York Times headline, further indicating they would not be facilitating Abrego Garcia's return as directed. Somebody needs to talk to the social team. Joining me now is MSNBC legal analyst and former acting assistant attorney general for national security, Mary McCord, Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst, Rick Tyler, and Democratic strategist, pollster, and MSNBC political analyst, Cornell Belcher. Thank you all. We have a lot of news. So I mentioned that emergency hearing, and I do just want to give some notes. So it is now in a brief recess till about 7:20, and they were petitioning before Judge Boasberg for a temporary restraining order to prevent the removal of Venezuelan men from the Blue Bonnet ICE facility in Northern District of Texas. Now, the lawyer for the ACLU said that immigration lawyers heard from their clients inside the facility who said they were giving a form to sign to be deported under the Alien Enemies Act. I have the form right here. I don't know if we have a link put up on the screen, but this is an example of the form. Mary, is any of this legal?
So I think it's important. People might be saying, didn't the Supreme Court the other day say that the cases needed to be brought in habeas in the jurisdictions where the people were detained? And so people might be wondering why Judge Boasberg's having this hearing. And that's because the ACLU is arguing he still has jurisdiction over their request for notice, right, for 30 days of notice before a deportation. And so he's having that hearing right now. And also that, there's also going to be a case brought there on behalf of those who have already been deported. So, right now there are also temporary restraining orders issued by judges in the Southern District of Texas in habeas and in New York in habeas. So it's a real question here as whether these men who were giving these notices, but not given enough time to do anything about them and scheduled to be on that plane, whether that was in violation of even of those existing temporary restraining orders. It's confusing to keep track of because
I'm very confused, but I got my notes.
Yeah.